Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hello, friends. So I've been asked to speak on the topic of anger management. And to speak on being able to manage something, the first thing we need to do is to understand what it is. Right? What is anger? Is it justified? Should we use it? Or should we just try to let it go? Right? It's a simple but complicated subject. For the Buddha, though, it was pretty simple. The Buddha was asked by Devas, he was asked, what is there anything that the Tathagata approves of killing? And the Buddha says, the awakened ones approve of the killing of anger with its honeyed crest and poison root. And so in all of the suttas, you'll only see the Buddha approving of killing one thing, our anger. So why does anger arise? That's important for us to investigate, to understand. Maybe somebody did something we don't like and we get angry. Maybe somebody did something that keeps us from going towards a goal that we had. Like we had to be somewhere at a certain place, but then there's traffic or somebody cuts us off and we get angry. This feeling arises like there's been some kind of injustice, right? Like this person deserves to be punished. And one of the most important things for us Buddhist practitioners to do is to first question our anger. When our anger arises, is this justified or not? Should I really be angry? Or is it just because I'm not getting what I want? Right? Because of course there are things that happens to us in our lives that would justify us being angry. So that's the first thing we have to see when we, if you want to talk about anger management, the first thing is to question our anger, to really see if it is, has a basis in reality, if it's a real serious thing, or if it's just us not getting what we want. So that's important. The first thing is to reflect on this. So say you see, oh, I really shouldn't be angry. This anger really isn't justified. Well, just right there, guess what usually happens? Your mind's like, oh, okay, I was being silly. There's really no need to be angry. And then your anger slowly starts to dissipate. But then maybe you look into your mind and you see, yes, this anger really is justified. This person I'm angry at, or whatever I'm angry at, really did do harm, cause me harm, cause my family harm, whatever, etc. Then there might be some sort of action that is required for you to do. But the Buddha is very clear that we should never act out of anger. Because anger can feel really sweet. It makes you feel powerful, right? And it also gives us justification to do really unskillful, bad things because the other person deserved it, right? And our actions, we can't go in front of some kind of karmic judge and say, no, well, I did this because of that person. No, our actions are our own, right? So this is why the Buddha is very careful about anger. The Buddha equates anger to a pot of water that's boiling. And he says, it is as if a person with good eyesight were to try to find their reflection in that pot of water. Have you ever been cooking? You looked into a boiling pot of water? You think you're ever going to see your reflection in water like that? No. Right? So the Buddha uses this. This is what anger is, he says. Right? Just as if the person trying to look for their reflection in a pot of boiling water, the same that somebody who is angry does not know what is best for them, does not know what is best for others, and cannot see clearly what is best for both. When you are angry, you are not seeing clearly. You are not thinking clearly. And 99.9% out of 100, whatever you do is going to make things worse or be unskillful in the very least. This is why Buddha says things like, a person, when somebody angry comes at you and curses you, the person who does not get angry in that situation and is calm in that situation is beneficial to that person and to themselves. Right? There is no justification ever in the early texts that the Buddha gives for taking action with anger. Never. Okay? To go back to the statement, I think this really gives you a view into what the Buddha views as anger, right? The Buddhas approve of the killing of anger with its honeyed crest and poison root. Think of like a sweet flower, right? The flower is where the bees go to get their pollen, right? The flower is very sweet, very beautiful, feels very nice. But even though on the outside it looks and feels good, underneath is poison. There's nothing good that you can do in this world through anger. Nothing. Anger could be a spur on something that kind of pushes you to action once you've analyzed your anger and you think, okay, no, this is legitimate, something needs to be done. But when you do that, though, you should never act out of anger. That is the time to let your anger subside. Come to a period where you're not consumed by emotion. You're able to start being mindful, start to think, and then you think, okay, what should I do? right? And then you get other people who are wiser than you involved as well. You say, this is what happened. I feel that something needs to be done. What do you think? Right? And then with this wise concourse, you can find a skillful way of handling the situation. Not out of screaming and yelling and running around. You know, in my career before I was a monk, I worked for Child Protective Services, and I worked with many people who had really strong anger issues for a variety of different reasons. But I saw how they would, if you have really strong anger issues, you can see how anger is like somebody grabs you, puts you on a roller coaster and straps you in, and you can do nothing until the roller coaster is over. I've spoken to some people, some families, some wives or husbands that I worked with, and they would explain, they said, like, something just came over me, and I got so angry, and now I feel so guilty. Now I wish that never happened. Right? That's the poison of anger. In the moment, it feels good. It feels like what you're doing is right. But afterwards, you realize, no, it wasn't right. It wasn't good. It didn't help anybody. Right? This is what the Buddha is saying when he talks about this poison root. So next time you're angry, don't get fooled by that feeling of justification, of righteous indignation, as they say. Don't get fooled by that. That's not going to help you. That's not going to make things better. Right? Reflecting on the dangers of your anger is one aspect of anger management. Right? When you get angry, you say, will this be helpful to me? What are the downside of me being angry? Oftentimes people, we get angry because of people or experiences out in the world, at work or whatever, and then we go home and then we kind of take it out on our families because they're the only ones that are there for you to take it out on, right? Or to vent yourself to. That's not very good either, because that doesn't create beneficial and harmony in your family. But as a Buddhist practitioner, we should reflect and understand, let me understand this anger and see how harmful it is. See how it leads me not to anything good, but to harm. And oftentimes, once you do that enough, you understand your anger. The next time you're angry, you have more control over it. You're not wrapped up. It's like, instead of some big strong guys grabbing you and throwing you in the roller coaster and strapping you in, you could say, no, I'm not going on this roller coaster. I feel this anger in me, but I know that it will lead to harm. So let me figure out a better way to handle this situation. Okay? That's good anger management. The Buddha gives us a story of what he calls the anger-eating demon. And this is a ugly yaka who goes into the halls of Saka, the king of the Devas. And he goes and he sits right on Saka's chair, his throne. And all the Devas, the attendants of Saka, got really angry, started throwing insults at him, and you're not worthy to sit on here, you can't do this, da, da, da. And all the insults, all the anger that was thrown at this yaka, he absorbed it, and he became more good-looking, more healthy, more calmly, right? And so he fed on this anger. And then eventually Saka, king of the Devas, he came back and he didn't have to do much. He didn't have to be angry at this Yaka. All Saka had to do was to proclaim his name, which is essentially proclaiming his goodness, his skillfulness. And this alone, this goodwill and proclamation of goodness, was enough to revert this Yaka back to its form. Right? This is like our anger. Our anger feeds, off of this. It grows and it looks ever more attractive, ever more justified. But that's just a trick. This is why the Buddha tells us about its poisoned root. And I've heard people say, people will say, well, why don't I just use my anger for good? They're being fooled. It's not going to help them. It will not lead to anything skillful. In the Dhammapada, right in the first page, Buddha tells us quite clearly, hatred can never be appeased by hatred in this world, only by non-hatred. This is an eternal law. You can't fight anger with anger. That just escalates the situation, makes things worse. That's a reflection you can do when you're in a situation and things are getting heated. You think, is this worth it? Is this helpful? That I'm going to just get defensive and fight back, and it's just going to escalate like a tennis match, just hitting the ball back and forth, escalating until words turn to fists or whatever else, even worse. Or do you practice the Buddha's way? Practice letting go of this anger. Practice thinking about the situation and what is the most skillful, beneficial way to handle it. Not to just let the emotions flow through you and you're off to the races, as they say, right? But to be mindful, to understand the danger of this anger, to understand that it benefits nobody. The Buddha is very clear on this. He doesn't give us any outs on anger. Now, of course, he all understood, and we should understand that we're not perfect. We're just humans. We're just beings in samsara. So we're going to get angry. We should never try to repress our anger. We should never fool ourselves and try to say, oh, I'm not angry. That's not good. That doesn't help anybody either. It's funny, I always kind of grew up a very kind of calm person. And, I grew up in an Italian family. And, with Italians, sometimes it gets heated. Right? And I'd always try to be like the neutral person, like the peacemaker. And so I developed in my mind this image that I wasn't an angry person. I'm not an angry person. But then I remember years later, I was in therapy and I was talking to my therapist and we were talking about anger. And he said, you know that sarcasm is anger. And it clicked. And I realized, whoa, actually, I'm the most sarcastic person I know. I am angry. I do have anger in me. And of course, once I became a Buddhist, I realized, well, duh, we all have it. Greed, hatred, and delusion. We all have anger in us. Some of us more than others, depending on all kinds of conditions. But anger is part of being a being, part of being a human. Right? So you should never you should never say, I've failed as a Buddhist, I got angry. Because that's not reality either. That's not the truth either. Anger has arisen, right? The Buddha tells us that all these things are not self. So the minute you're like, I got angry, I failed, you're just causing yourself more suffering. Instead of, oh, anger has arisen in my mind. Let me see why. Let me see the causes and conditions. Right? It's not about pushing it away. Because let me tell you something. When you push away anger, it just pushes back. It just comes back. So this is why the term anger management is actually quite a good term for Buddhists. Because you can't force anger away. You have to understand it. Buddha wants us to understand the gratification of it, right? You really understand, oh, this feels good. I feel powerful. Like in American comic books, they have the character called the Hulk, the big green guy, right? Usually he's just a scientist and then he gets angry and he turns into the big green guy, right? And it feels powerful. It's like, oh, I can do anything, right? That's just an illusion. It's just a falsity. And that's why you need to understand it. Then you understand, no. You're not fooling me this time. I see that this is just an illusion. That this is actually not going to be beneficial. Right? So you should understand this, the feeling of justification and righteousness. You should really understand that. Don't try to push it away. Don't try to ignore it or deny that it exists. It's there. Then you should understand, think about, where is this anger going to lead me? Where has it led me in the past? And think, well, it's never led me anywhere really good. Maybe it seems so at the time. Maybe even in the short term it seems so. But in the long run, it was actually harmful. And you say, okay. Well, now I understand when anger arises. Let me make sure that I don't allow my anger to make me do something really bad. The anger can be there. But when you've reached that point, then you actually have the choice. You have the ability to make sure that you don't allow that anger to cause you to hurt yourself or others. So we're never repressing our anger. We're never denying it's there. When it arises, we want to know it. We want to understand it. This is the Buddha's way. Never ever a denial of reality. We want to yata bhuta, see things as they are, to understand them as they are. Not how we want them to be, not how we wish them to be, but as they are. No denial, no repression, no delusion. This anger has arisen. Let me understand this anger. The Buddha, again in the Dhammapada, it's all in the same spot. It's all in the first pages of the Dhammapada. He covers this so wonderfully. He says, he abused me, he struck me, he harmed me. Those who continuously harbor such thoughts never cease their anger. He abused me, he harmed me, he struck me. Those who abandon such thoughts cease their anger. So what is the Buddha telling us there? You might have feelings, thoughts that arise, oh, that person did this to me, right? But we don't repress it. These arise, but we don't feed it, right? Like feeding something, like feeding a fire to make it grow. We never want to do that with our anger. If it's there, that's one thing, but we should never want to feed it. We can slowly starve it. How do we starve it? By practicing metta. Practicing metta, limitless goodwill, loving friendliness, loving kindness, however you want to translate it. Metta is the antidote to anger. The Buddha gives a list of things for dealing with somebody who has caused aversion, agitation, anger in you. The first thing you do is practice metta towards that person. And if that doesn't quell your anger, you practice compassion towards that person. Oh, this person is causing themselves so much suffering. Right? Not in a pity, like, oh, that person's stupid, they don't realize what they're doing, because it's very easy to become kind of arrogant and pitiful about it. But you're really saying, oh, man, I know what it's like to be angry and how stupid I act. And this person, I hope they realize what they're doing. Right? That's real compassion. Not like out of pity or derision, looking down on somebody, but really like, oh man, this is, I know where they are. I've been there. That really is bad. I don't like being that way. So I hope that they are able to see the harm they're doing to themselves and others. Right? And another thing to deal with somebody, if metta and karuna don't work, then you practice just trying to be away from the person, separating yourself from the person. Trying to be equanimous, right? You don't have to you don't have to like the person, but you don't have to hate them either. Just reflecting they're simply a being in samsara. And then lastly, reflecting on the fact that they are the owner of their karma. They will suffer because of this. Again, not in a pitying way, not in a karma's gonna get you, karma's a bitch, as they say. No, not like that, because guess what? That's harming you. You're creating bad karma for yourself that way, right? But you say, they're the owners of their karma. It's not going to go well for them, that they're doing this. Let me also reflect on how I am the owner of my karma. How should I act? And then you realize, oh, okay, I don't want to act this way. Right? I don't want to allow myself to be angry and to do unskillful things. Let me try to abandon that. Let me practice letting that go. Letting it be. Or if I need to act, acting with wisdom, with mindfulness, with compassion, with goodwill. Right? Those are four things that are very important to act with. wisdom, mindfulness, compassion, and goodwill. If you have these in your mind when you're trying to act, there's no guarantee that what you're going to do is going to be perfectly skillful and wholesome, but it will be a lot better if your mind is full of anger, right? Because we're not awakened beings. So even when we are doing things skillfully, it's not going to be perfect, right? We can still cause harm even if we're being skillful, because we don't understand yet. We don't see yet. But it's still much better than if we allowed ourselves to go on an anger rampage, right? That doesn't help anybody. So remember the Buddha's word on anger. When you get angry, reflect on that anger. Investigate it. Don't try to push it away. Don't feel bad that you're angry. Your mind might say, I'm a Buddhist, I shouldn't be angry, or all these kind of things. It's okay. Don't feel bad. Remember, we're trying to see the truth. We're not trying to deny anything. Anger is there. How do I understand it? How do I work to let it go? How do I not let it cause me to do harm to myself and others? That is true anger management. To let something go, you first have to understand it. You have to understand how it works. Once you understand how it works, you have the power, you have the ability to choose how to react. Instead of just going on autopilot, going with the flow of your emotions. That almost never ends up in a skillful and a beneficial way. So friends, I hope these words on anger management and how the Buddha talks to us and teaches us about anger and how to deal with it have been very beneficial to you. Sukhi hotu, may you be happy. Practice well and be well.